Good afternoon. It is January. I have no idea what day it is. It's Wednesday. So I think it's the 15th of January, and it's early afternoon for me here. And this is the first video that you're seeing of me post surgery. So you can see there's a sling around my little tricky little arm here. And I'm still a little loopy. If you can tell the difference between when I am loopy and when I am not loopy, you'll understand that even that much better. What I wanted to do, though, was to begin to post videos for next week, as I have done for this for this present week, which is presently week 2. And I'll preface that by saying that week 2 and week 3 are really tied together very closely. You know, you really can't do a good week 3 without having mastered the assignments and expectations of week 2. And so I'll come to that in a moment. I also wanted to say before I forget, although it may be out of sequence, that the assignments on week 3 are pretty complex. So I put down due dates, DUE dates, I think for the following weekend. But I will tell you that I'm okay with you not handing something in within the due date window, because I expect that some of these assignments will require some real thinking time on your side. All I would ask is that you just let me know via an email or some other way, by TomToms, if that works, just explaining that you need some more time because these assignments require some deep thinking. And so that's the first thing I really wanted you to know about the week 3 expectations. So that's important. And I also wanted to, one more time, reiterate that the week 2 assignments, the futures wheel and the cross impact matrix activities, completely, absolutely lead to the week 3. And so if you're a little unsure about how those rolled for you, you have to come back and either find me or via an email or some other way for us to connect, or to look at the feedback I'll be giving you as you begin to post the assignments, which I will do. As soon as I get the assignment, I pretty much get to them as rapidly as I possibly can. So stay tuned. But one more time, understand that the futures wheel was intended for you to project what we call if-then futures, and you've heard that word from me more than once. And what you had done was have chosen a potential future to consider. Let me come back to that in a moment as well. But in the end, what I was trying to get you to recognize is that the futures don't really look at all like they probably sometimes appear to you, because there are really arrays, alternative ranges and spectrum of futures for you to consider. Once you begin to internalize that, you'll see what I'm driving at. Now, I just crossed my fingers so I wouldn't forget that the other piece of this is where your what's the word I'm looking for? Where your personal thrust is. I don't know if I like that now, but that's where it comes from. That's what I thought of for the moment. When I think of futures, certainly I can think of those kinds of futures that many of you have posed to me in terms of your own leadership expectations and your own personal futures. I'm going to widen that a little bit, and that's why some of the videos in week 3 will put you in places that many of you have not necessarily considered. Let me give you a quick one. And I don't claim to be an expert about this, but let's talk about it for a moment. What about artificial intelligence? To the extent that we all understand what artificial intelligence exactly is, and I'm not sure I necessarily have my arms around that moving elephant any more than probably anybody else does. How does artificial intelligence intersect with the personal futures that some of you have been considering? How does it intersect with coaching? Question mark. How does artificial intelligence intersect with the nursery school that you run? Now, I'm just playing with your heads, but what I want you to do is think about that big bad future out there, and insofar as how you see all of what the future, with a small f, necessarily means. I mean, this is kind of pat cliche-ish. I mean, 10 or 15 years ago, none of us had even thought about what a smartphone was. And now you can't walk into a doctor's office, where I just came from, when somebody hasn't got their smartphone in their face, and they're either amusing themselves, connecting with somebody else, or teaching themselves something else that they would not have even thought about doing 10 or 15 years ago. Now it's 2020. Project ourselves out to the next decade, assuming that all of you are youngsters, as I get the idea that you are. 10 years from now, will the same skill sets that you have now and leadership competencies that you have now work in 10 years from now? Or will you need to adapt to what that's all about? Here's a silly example. Bernardo does not like Blackboard, as you probably know, although I'm getting better at it. As much as I believe in technology, maybe more than most people you meet, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, as a so-and-so-year-old person, his birthday is fast approaching, as a matter of fact. It's sometimes difficult for me to make that change from teaching face-to-face to using this forum to get to work with you, to teach you the things that this course is intended to teach you. Don't laugh at me, but I remember a time when we literally went out, some friends of mine, teachers friends of mine, we went out and forced the principal to buy a VHS recorder. The principal went crazy, didn't want anything to do with it. He thought it was the devil incarnate. We had to stand on our heads to get him to finally agree for us to buy this for the one VCR for the entire building. It was a major shift over. I can go back to when I was in high school, when our school won a grant for overhead projectors. I hope you even know what they are. Where an overhead projector was state-of-the-art technological innovation. And how, to what extent in which the faculty, that my teachers back in high school, back before any of you were born, had to figure out a way to make this part of their teaching arsenal. And so I'm just trying to get some seeds in the ground with you to recognize that, yeah, I want you to master the dispositions and the skills of this course. And again, understanding that we're doing this kind of a sprint speed rather than a marathon approach, which would be a short course rather than a long course. So that when you walk out the door a week, metaphorically from me, a week from now, or I guess a week and a half from now, you'll have these skills and dispositions integrated into your own thinking, and hopefully into those whom you influence one way or another. And not only for your personal futures, but for the groups you lead or want to lead, for the organizations that you mean to influence, in order to change what we do, in order for it to align with what should be done, to put it as simply as, and although it didn't sound so simple when I said it. And so this week 2 that you're in the middle of now topples over into week 3, where these skills begin to intersect with each other. So just to remind you, you're doing a futures wheel. The futures wheel is a simple if-then chart, where you're projecting arrays or varieties of futures associated with whatever the future was you put in the center. And with that, you're going to ripple that out at least 2 levels. The center section goes to the next level out, which I call the primary futuring circle. You're going to identify some futures that come from the center future, and then more importantly, you're going to identify out at least 2 per each of those, so that you have some clue as to what the arrays of possible futures are among in and around among the issue that you should have. Someone just asked me how many futures should they project, and because she was afraid that she'd project too many, and I respect that greatly. I'm smiling because I agree with her. But to keep this simple for you, so you get that muscle. Basically, I'm talking about one in the middle, 4, that's 5, and 2, and so about 13 or 14 futures should be projected out from where you are. So once you ripple that out, and you have another video about how to do that. The next piece would be to decide which of those are the most probable futures. And I stop there because I want you to think about what you think probable means, and what you truly, in your own mind, based on how you may have done some information and data gathering, may have suggested for the next place out. So you're going to project out the future if-thens. You're going to identify what you think the probable futures, the most probable futures are, I guess is a better way to look at it. And if you want to cheat a little bit, you also may want to put a little check in this in the futures that you want to happen. That would be the preferable future, the third P of the three Ps of futuring. From that, you're going to take the preferable and probable futures, and you're going to line them up into a cross impact matrix. And you're going to use that template to project how those probable futures may be affected by or may affect given issues. So to use my example of artificial intelligence, if we were to say artificial intelligence will be regularly used in all teaching and instruction, okay? I think that's probably a pretty probable future up the road. And here's a silly question, rhetorical question. So how does that affect students? How does that affect faculty? How does that affect leadership? How does the parents and the community respond to that? And you ripple that out, and what you're going to do is you're going to begin to identify other issues and themes and likely other probable futures that you didn't consider the first time through that now are looking at you in the face. And that brings you through week 2. Now we come over to week 3. And as I said before, week 3 is a pretty has very high expectations of you. So let's go slowly, and let us share the screen, because when week 3 folder opens up, I think it's on the 17th, you will see some of the same thing I'm going to share right now. And here are the goals. They go 5, 6, 7, but they don't necessarily go in this direct order. And forgive me for reading to you. Goal 5 is to identify ways to use type 3 futures-based change leadership to improve the organization's capacity to positively engage the emerging future through transformative scenario and development planning. It's a very heavy-duty piece. And before I go any further, you just came through futures 2, which is what you're doing right now this week. And you're going from if-then futuring to 3-dimensional futuring. Think of if-then futuring as 2-dimensional. Now we're talking about 3-dimensional futuring. Deeper futuring, which is harder to do, obviously. Harder to compute, so to speak. And so your type 3 expectations up the road are going to lead you to, and you can see this here, will lead you to developing a scenario. That's really the goal for that. You're going to develop a scenario. And the scenario will require an action design. Okay? Now, keep that in the back of your mind. We'll go to learning objective 6. The scenario that you pick will be the one that you think is the most probable, not necessarily the most preferable. To use the artificial intelligence piece for a second. Again, if you think it's very probable that artificial intelligence will be a major part of instruction in the school system, or even in your businesses that you may be leading, what does that mean? Let's go say with schools for a minute. What does that mean for the poor schools, for the Wyandanches, for the Kopeks, for the Freeports, for the Roosevelts, where the money just isn't there to distribute artificial intelligence across the board all that quickly without some major help? Does that provoke a gulf between rich people and poor people? If you're reading Newsday, I'm going to provide a link for that. It's not up yet, but I will provide it. If you're reading Newsday from last week, you'll see that Newsday is clearly identified as a spending gap between the poor districts on Long Island and the rich. Now, what does that mean? I mean, you know what it means. Project it out, future it out. And so you're going to have a scenario where maybe things are going to be, very positive for rich districts, and very bleak, even bleaker than it might be even be now, for the poorer districts. And what does that mean? What would that look like? What would that look like? What story can you develop from that? Now, staying with objective 6, see that it will talk about the probable future that you choose, not necessarily the preferable one, but the probable future, the most likely future that you see emerging from your analysis. Is that acceptable? does it match with, differ with, deep, in many ways, or in just a few ways, between your probable future and your preferable future? Is that what you want? Do you want to have rich districts flourish at the expense of poor districts? I don't. I'll tell you that flat away. And I don't have the solution to that this minute, but I will say that it will take a coalesced will of collaborative people willing to reconsider what that's all about. And that will happen, I think, as this is a probable future for sure, within the next several years, if not sooner. And that's what that objective is about, to decide whether you accept your probable future. That is, you accept it, you think it's just fine, you're going to go with it or not. My money is, for the most part, you're going to say, meh. Some of you say, no way. Some of you will say, yes, I do. I don't think any of you will say, yes, I do. That's my projection of where I think you're going to land, which will lead us to learning objective 7, which is about evaluating and considering an action plan intended to meet the preferable future. I'll explain that better up the road, but essentially you're going to use a template and you're going to show me what your goal is, and you're going to identify a couple of strategies that you would use. Some people have already begun to send me some great ideas about this, about how you would transform your group or yourself to meet the preferable future that you really want. Or, many of you will say this, and there's nothing wrong with this, by the way, pick an action, sets of actions that will enable you to adapt to the future that you see, even though you don't like it that much. So you're kind of holding your nose, and you want to tweak it a little bit and hope that things get better over time. I have opinions about that, but that would be safe for another course. So we have goals 5, 6, and 7. And then here are some of the things that are accumulating here. I've posted a couple of great videos. This particular one, some of you are completely drank the Otto Scharmer Theory U Kool-Aid. And if you haven't, I get the idea not all of you reading the book, by the way, and I think that you may want to go back and use the book that you paid for. But more particularly at this point, look at chapter 7 and 8. But Scharmer is a Theory U, and I believe that's chapter 3, if I remember correctly. And we'll take a look at this video when he talks about the emerging future. Now, he talks about the globe. He's not talking about your future. He's talking about the global future. He's talking about climate change and financial structures. But you'll understand where he's coming from very quickly. So the word probable future and the word emerging future both come into play on that. Now, there's 2 other videos. One you may have seen before. It's called the Corning Glass. Corning Glass is a corporation in upstate New York, Corning, New York, that makes glass and has made some very famous videos about the future of glass. They're pretty interesting. I think this one's from 2012, so it's already 8 years old, and therefore it's a little bit antiquated. Think about that, 8 years old, and it's antiquated. Just to jump over to another place for a minute, I'm a Disney World idiot savant. I imagine most of you have at least been there once. Tomorrowland is far from being Tomorrowland. They couldn't rebuild Tomorrowland every day to keep ahead of what Tomorrowland looks like tomorrow, because it's just too rapid in certain senses. Epcot itself, the front of Epcot, Future World, same premise, the same problems sometimes obtain. And so the future moves so rapidly, and that's really brings to mind the book that's in your bibliography called Future Shock by by Toffler. You want to read that book, even though it's 50 years old. That book is very prophetic about understanding society that you are in and will be in for the rest of your lives as such. And the third YouTube is very short, but it talks a bit about some technological advances. And those 3 together, I urge you to watch in order for you to get a deeper and a wider, I don't like this word, vision, perspective of the numbers of socioeconomic disposition of factors, international issues and climate issues, science issues that we talk about, how they're intersecting with each other, and no one necessarily has gotten their arms around the moving elephant that is the future as such. So yes, I do want you to look at those videos. Um, in terms of the assignments, there's two premises here. One is what they call a Cartesian scenario template, which I won't explain here, but it'll be kind of self-explanatory. Also, I think it's chapter 8 or maybe 7 in the book explains how to do this. So I'm not going to beat this to death, but you're going to be expected to create a scenario where you're going to identify four scenarios. You're going to come up with 4 scenarios, not one, but 4. And then from the 4, you're going to pick one that you think is most probable. And I'm going to be pretty rigid about for the expectation of that. 4 down to 1, but you have to start with 4, and I'll show you how to do more of that. And then you're going to need to write a scenario. Just a paragraph. People make a lot of money sitting in think tanks in Washington and New York who write economic and financial and military and all sorts of political scenarios that are out there. But in your case, I just want you to write one paragraph about the scenario that, about what the probable scenario that you've chosen. And from that, and it's not on here yet, but you come back to the learning objective 7, you will develop an action design based on whether you want to adapt from the probable scenario or whether you want to transform it. So that's what this particular, I'm going to go to the assignments real quickly, so you have a handle on that. But that's basically the expectation. They're tough, and there's no question about it. There are definitely questions about this that you're going to need to sit down and think about. So make sure that you take care of that. Let me go to the discussion board first. You all did a great job with that. Here are the week for the ones I've been able to read so far. Week 3, there's 4 questions. Thus far, how has your futures-based thinking solidified or evolved based on the course? Number 2, think about your thinking. What was the thinking, dispositions, skills, and points of view that drove you to the scenario that you picked out? Why or to what extent did you or your organization decide to adapt or transform? Why did you decide to adapt or transform? And based on the sum, the addition, the total of the book and of the course, describe how you might be able to transform, there's that verb, your organization to being a more futures-based and purposeful. Those are tough questions, and they may not make a lot of sense now. All the more reason to read those chapters in the book, as well as look at the PowerPoint that if I haven't posted yet, I think I did. I'll make sure that you have. I did post the PowerPoint, so you have that too. So you have really 3 sources. You have me speaking to you right now. You have the book, and you have the different materials that I've pulled together. And assuming that you're getting your fingernails dirty and those things, you should be in pretty good shape. So those are the discussions, and here are the assignments. Okay, so assignment 1 is based on your analysis of the probable futures, excuse me, going back to the week that you're presently in, and using the template that I already spoke about. You have to look at that to understand it better and or read the text. Identify 4 probable scenarios and write 1 paragraph for each scenario. I've given you a sample, not of necessarily of yours Cartesian template, but just a general one so you can see what a good scenario in a paragraph might look like. Second assignment. Based on the criteria of relevance, logic, and plausibility, choose 1 scenario. And you can't cheat with me and give me 2. It has to be 1. Choose 1 scenario as your most likely probable emerging future. And 1 or 2 paragraphs explain why you chose that scenario. You can say the world's going to hell in a handbag. You can say that there will be no world. You can say that we've all become George Jetson, if you know what George Jetson was. And life is wonderful. You can say anything you want, but tell me why you chose that particular scenario. Which brings me over to assignment 3, which is in 2 paragraphs, whether and why, explain whether and why you chose that scenario as the most probable one, and what conclusion you can draw about whether you want to adapt to that scenario because you really can't fix it, make it any better than what that scenario suggests, or transform from it. And that would be an action design. Which brings us over to the last assignment. You'll get a template for that, which I have not put up yet. And that template will be, have you use the template to identify one future goal, preferred future goal, 2 strategies to meet the goal, and how you would know whether you met those strategies that have worked to help you transform your personal / organizational / national / international goal. So those are not easy assignments. I won't pretend that they're simple things. Presuming that you've done the best job you could with the second scenario, with the second week material that you're in the middle of now, and with my feedback, you should be able to make the bridge over. I will tell you though, that, as I said, I have no problem giving you a little extra time for you to make this right. Because if you rush it and you in order to get it done by whatever the date is that I set for the completion, and the rush makes your product less than what you're capable of being, I'm perfectly okay with your doing it, taking some extra time. And as I've done a couple of students with some other assignments already, I have no problem saying to a student, you need to fix this, resubmit it. I'm okay with that too. I'm not trying to put anybody in a bad place, and I'm not trying to give anybody a futures-based rash. Okay, so that's really the basic thing. The only thing I need to put up, I think, is a video about how to do the scenario and a video about how to do the action plan design, and I will do that probably tomorrow, but you won't know that I didn't do it until then because you won't have to open this up until this Saturday. So with that, I will say, I'll be saying more things to you. I have to tell you that I have enjoyed working with you. Wish I'd gotten to know you all better, and hope that I will continue to be able to work with you in one form or another. So never hesitate to ask me questions about things like along the lines. I can see that some of your thinking has definitely changed, and that was my preferred future. Okay. Stay tuned for some more videos up the road.